Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. In order to really do this, I have to go back just a little bit in our Slack chat. I have to go back and read one of your posts.
Oh, dear.
You say, per all the discussions I've been following, Spotlight is likely going to be getting a Best Picture nom, so I'll be seeing it in theaters most likely. Honestly, you're the only person I've heard say it's bad. It has ridiculously high scores on RT and Metacritic. Not that I don't believe you, but... And then you end on an ellipsis.
Yeah, I just kind of let it hang there, didn't I?
Remarkably passive-aggressive response to my review. I did see Spotlight. It was, as you recall, from last week, it was my birthday. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. We got to jump from holiday to holiday.
Yes, for all our American listeners out there, Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
For everyone else in the world, Happy Thursday.
Yeah, we're shutting up now.
Here's to the end of November.
Yeah, you made it. So I saw Spotlight, and I was very excited about this movie.
I know.
And now I'm pretty excited for you to see it, because I am totally willing to believe that that my views are a bit askew. This is a movie with some great actors and a crummy script, and it is what I would like to call a one-trick pony. They do research, and that's pretty much all they do, and they don't even make it look all that sexy. It's all about documents. And it's a really sensitive story. It's this idea, or it's telling the true story of the archdiocese in Boston, and the fall of the cardinal around the sex abuse scandals. And it obviously stars some incredible people. Mark Ruffalo, Michael Keaton, Rachel McAdams, Leif Schreiber. He was, in my view, the highlight of the film, Leif Schreiber. Everybody else was great. He was the highlight. Mark Ruffalo was the real low point. Not because not because of any other reason than I think they just came up with a character that does not fit his demeanor and his physicality and his voice in particular. It's just tough to watch. I never got into it. Real snoozer. I found myself wandering many times.
I wonder if you would like Truth, because it's funny, because I've heard how untruthful, I don't know if untruthful is the right word, but how skewed that one is as far as the way that they chose to tell that story, versus this one. I've heard that they really kind of told this in the exact right way. So I'm curious, if you see Truth, kind of what your perception would be of that as compared to this.
Okay, and that brings up a really good question. And insofar as we have talked a number of times about how to handle these biographical stories or these true stories,
right?
And what do you do when you are left in a position to take a story that may be interesting when you read it in the newspaper, but when you dramatize it is pretty boring? And how do you take that and actually make it a story that is worth seeing in the theater? And that, I think, is the problem that Spotlight runs into, is that it is an incredible story. That when you throw all these great actors at the screen and tell them to act it out, it becomes something that is less interesting. But part of the problem is, and I hate the comparison to, All the President's Men, although I know we've had a couple of our listeners write in and say they didn't really get into it as much as we did, certainly. I'm a big fan of that film. I think Hoffman and Redford are terrific. I think one of the things that makes that film stand out is that it's telling a complicated story through two people, right? We're through two eyes. And in Spotlight, we have like six. It is just the reporters alone. We go from 2 to 4, which adds a degree of complication to it. We're following too many people to, I think, develop any real connection with who the actors are portraying, and that's a real challenge over the course of 2 hours. I think maybe it would have been better as a series, like a Netflix series. I'm with you on Truth, and I haven't seen it yet. I'm very excited to see it for that very same reason, and I wonder if it looks to me like they are really focusing on Cate Blanchett and Robert Redford's characters as the sort of eyes through which we're seeing this story, and might make it a little bit easier to understand the drama of it.
Yeah, and I know that McCarthy, who directed Spotlight, really purposefully avoided singling out like one or two of the reporters and kind of reworking the truth to focus and to make a couple of them seem like the heroes. He really wanted it to kind of feel like a team effort, and that was kind of a big part of it. Even though it didn't necessarily give anybody as much of that heroic bent in the story. So yeah, it's interesting that he chose to go that way to make it feel more truthful. But as far as what you have seen, it just isn't coming across that way. So I'm really curious to see that one. I need to get out and see that sometime soon so we can chat more about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm gonna run out this week and grab during the holiday week. I'm gonna grab Truth because I love journalism movies, and that's one of the reasons I felt sort of personally affronted by the fact that I did not like this. I wanted to like it a lot. But it leads me to my next response.
Okay.
All right. And it is about trailers.
Okay.
Because this was the good Steve Sarmentos, Once and Future King. He says, trailers build expectations that the films can't live up to. Better to walk in blind and be surprised. And Stephen Smart, trailers are adverts. I avoid trailers, or at least I don't seek them out. One or two will find me, of course. I mean, the trailer for Spectre was on for the breakfast news, for crying out loud. That's how big Bond is in the UK. Okay, so we talk about trailers every single week.
Right.
And here are two people who say, we hate trailers, we don't want to do trailers. I disagree with them. I actually love trailers, and I think the reason I love them is because I'm looking for... They have become my white whale. And the reason in Spotlight in particular... When I see a trailer that's great, that I love, and I find myself really attracted to that story, and I'm really looking forward to the movie, and I see the movie, and it is also great, it makes the trailer experience that much better. I love it when the pair of the mini art form of making this advertisement for the film matches up with my expectations of the success of the film. That's why I watch trailers. Not to be spoiled, not to be... I mean, I watch trailers because I love... It's like the jelly that has to go with the peanut butter and the bread. What do you think? Am I out of line?
I love trailers too. I love just kind of the tease that they do. I mean, I think that there is more of an art form to finding the right way to tell a trailer than there is an art necessarily of trailers. I think what I really enjoy about trailers is when they put a trailer out and it gives me a great tease of the film and I have a good sense of it. And yeah, like you, when I like the film too, that's just an even bigger win. The thing that does get me frustrated with trailers is when they either tell too much of the story and I feel like I've actually seen the film, or when they keep putting trailers out, and it's like, I feel like Star Wars is a perfect example. I actually still have not watched the most recent Star Wars. I've only seen the initial teaser of the Star Wars trailers, and I really like. I shouldn't say the initial. I saw the first trailer. I saw the teaser and the first trailer. I haven't seen the most recent trailer that came out.
That was TV. That was just a TV trailer, right? You haven't. No. Are you saying you haven't seen the big feature trailer?
I haven't seen the big feature trailer
because they were calling everything leading up to the feature trailer was a teaser, which I think is a misnomer.
I think it's a misnomer too, because the last teaser was full trailer length.
Yes,
I think it's silly to call that a teaser.
And the feature trailer, it doesn't give us anything more than the teaser trailer did. It gives us some new images, but it doesn't. I think this is an example of a really good trailer that it shows you enough of the film to really want to see all of that, but bigger. But it doesn't give away any of the story.
But here's the question, though. Did you need that, or was the initial last teaser, was that enough? Like, for me, I was like, that was what I needed out of the trailer. It got me sold on the movie and everything. I didn't need them to keep pumping trailer after trailer, because then there was the official trailer, then there's the international trailer, then there's a gazillion TV spots, and I've just ended up skipping them all. Because, I had my fill. I'm like, I'm excited for Star Wars. I don't need them to keep kind of pumping me with it. I'll watch all those. I'll see the film, and then if I want to watch them, I'll watch them.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that is a failure of. It ends up being a failure of sort of movie marketing, and I know that I'm alone in this because I think that movie marketers would say just the opposite. I also think that Star Wars is unique. They didn't need probably to have multiple trailers to get people excited about this because enough people are excited about a single trailer. I mean, they just release a poster. They probably could have gotten away with sort of the follow-on word of mouth as a result that they, the thing would have been blown up anyway. I think that that makes me sad, the sort of trend that we're on, the trend line we're on of just every movie gets multiple teasers, multiple trailers. I think that's really sad. I think just a single good trailer and putting it in the right places in the right rotation, it makes for a nice package. So
yeah,
that does bum me out. Yeah. The other thing that bums me out, and I'll end on my rant on this. I think it was Wired posted an article on that, and the headline was "You will not live to see the last Star Wars movie."
Right, I saw.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
That made me so sad.
Yeah.
Am I sort of wanderings?
No, I think that's kind of what happens when a big conglomerate like Disney ends up taking the reins. Is they feel that it becomes a James Bond sort of thing where they want it to be now just a franchise that can spin in all sorts of different directions and just can kind of keep living on in eternity. I think that's a very interesting way to take it. I don't know. I have, yin-yang feelings about that. I miss the days of just having kind of even just the original trilogy as that was Star Wars for me. That was kind of a perfect little package of Star Wars to have in my life. The other side of me is just thrilled that, hey, it's this never-ending galaxy of stories that they can kind of keep spinning in all sorts of different yarns, whether it's a political thriller or a heist film or just a straight up space opera action film or whatever. They have a whole universe that they can kind of do interesting stories with, and I think that's very exciting.
I do too, and this is the first time that I've ever been left to question my own mortality. That's all I'm saying. I do love the two things about the article. If you haven't seen it in Wired.com, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's not really an infographic, but the art to go along with it is fantastic. It's a really detailed sort of Futurama style giant poster of all of the artifacts and fetish items of Star Wars and characters. They've got C-3PO weirdly in an Aliens loader, but the Hulk is in there. The Raiders of the Lost Ark is in there, but you can't really see it unless you roll this loop over the entire graphic. They have a loop there, and you can swing your mouse over and look at all the detail in this animation. It's really, really cool. And I'm not going to lie to you, in this paragraph, 2012, even then it was pretty clear Lucasfilm was going to make more Star Wars movies. I just have this very simple idea, John Knoll says, about rebel spies in the opening crawl of A New Hope who steal the plans for the Death Star. Kennedy got Knoll's reference, of course. It's the beginning of the movie. In the ribbon of text that sets the scene, rebel spies manage to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. That's a very good idea, John, Kennedy said. So, green light. That's how you get to make a Star Wars movie. And I found myself really excited about that movie, too. Oh, I would want to see that movie. And I hope it stars the entire cast from Ocean's 11.
Well, that one's, it's...
I know.
Not too far away.
I know. I'm excited about that. I'm a fanboy. All right, I'm enough out of me. Shall we tell the people where we're from?
Where are we from?
This is the next reel on RashPixelFM. Everybody. We're recording this in the morning, and things just aren't running the same way they usually do. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hola!
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, a listener has spoken. Tonight, our benefactor has brought us some international flair with Luis Buñuel's 1961 film, Viridiana. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show on iTunes or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And if you've ever had your faith tested and wound it up playing poker in a Spanish dive, man, are you not alone. So hit up The Next Reel's Instagram, hashtag Pony Prize, hashtag Guess the Movie Challenge. And for that, we cross the great big sea to our dear friend Stephen Smart for a very big and consequential update this week.
Hey guys. Well, this week we had lots of fantastic guesses, but no winner. Only the fourth time that that's happened. This week's movie was The Accidental Tourist from 1988, directed by Lawrence Kasdan, based on the book by Ann Tyler. It starred William Hurt, Kathleen Turner and Gina Davis. As always, a new challenge starts Friday, so thanks guys, and see you later.
Andy, it's time. Let's do trailers. I don't know. I want to call this what? Die Hard 7? This is another movie. We talked last week about how excited I was about Gods of Egypt because it was the perfect movie to get to watch on your birthday when you get a free pass for taste. This seems to be another one directed by Stephen Miller, written by Max Adams and Umair Alim, stars Bruce Willis, Gina Carano, Kellen Lutz, and it looks exactly like the most recent Die Hard film where Bruce Willis and his family are embroiled in some sort of international espionage. In this case, a former CIA operative is kidnapped by a group of terrorists. When his son learns there is no plan for his father to be saved, he launches his own rescue operation. So his son is coming to rescue Bruce instead of Bruce coming to rescue his son. Other than that, it's lots of guns and lots of action and lots of diving and some pretty exciting one-liners that, and as a result, I think the film is relatively substance-free, again, based on the trailer. And should be a good birthday movie. Were you excited about this at all?
I was not. This looked like a straight-to-video movie.
It did.
And I have a feeling it's going to be because it's opening opposite Star Wars. So I have a feeling it's just going to get...
Oh, dear. That's...
And a dump. But, and like... I was excited when I saw Bruce Willis, but then it becomes clear that he's kind of a supporting character in this, and Kellen Lutz is really the protagonist. And I was like, who is this Kellen Lutz guy? I mean, I don't really know. I know he's been in the Twilight movies.
This is definitely Immortals a Kellen Lutz vehicle, as they say.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. And then it was like, it wasn't from Lionsgate. It was, I can't remember what it said. It was a Lionsgate...
like a subsidiary or something.
Yeah, it sounded like their direct to video spin-off. And I just can't remember what that was called, but
I have seen no other films from Stephen Miller, the writer director. He's done a bunch of other horror films. I don't know much of Max Adams, though. He has, I think, more credit to his CV. He did Heist back in 2015. Like I say that as if it was so long ago, but it opens. It opened November 13, 2015. But it has, that was Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Dave Bautista, and De Niro. And I haven't seen it. I don't know much about it.
That's another one that I think went straight to video.
Yeah, it's sad. So anyhow, these are movies that got made, and I feel like, again, as birthday movies, they are perfect fare.
I don't agree. I mean, I don't disagree.
We're going to get all passive-aggressive again,
right.
Andy?
No, I don't disagree. I mean, this does look like the sort of film that I could very easily put on late at night and just lay there and watch it and not fall asleep because it's bad enough that I would still enjoy it.
You know, this coming year for our guilty pleasure pick, we should pick movies that we haven't seen but just know are going to be guilty pleasures.
Like Extraction.
It opens potentially directly to video December 18th, 2015. So when you're done with Star Wars and you are down to thinking about whether or not you want to see Extraction or Star Wars again, probably see Star Wars again. And then much later, see Extraction on your birthday.
Yes.
That's it.
There you go. Well, I'm very excited about my trailer. It's got Melissa McCarthy. It's got Kristen Bell. It's got Girl Scouts. It's got Peter Dinklage, Kathy Bates. It looks like an R-rated like Girl Scout comedy, and
Who doesn't want that?
Exactly. Melissa McCarthy just, I talk about every trailer that rolls around with her in it. I swear, Spy was one of my favorites of this year. I couldn't stop laughing with that film. This looks just so funny. It's this woman, a titan of industry. She's sent to prison after she's caught for insider trading. That's Melissa McCarthy's character. And when she emerges ready to rebrand herself as America's latest sweetheart, not everyone she screwed over is so quick to forgive and forget. As IMDb's synopsis says, Kristen Bell is her assistant who ends up taking her in when she gets out of prison. And along with her daughter, kind of convinces her to help out with her daughter's little, I think they call them dandelions, her little dandelion troop in the cookie fundraiser. And as a titan of industry, she's just shocked at how pathetic it all is. And so she takes on this challenge of turning this little dandelion troop into a cookie selling machine. And it just looks so funny. The conversations that Melissa McCarthy has that are just so completely inappropriate with these young girls about girl-on-girl action, things like that.
The street fight
so
is a riot.
The street fight, and then the last little sweater bit in the trailer.
Yeah.
I really just couldn't stop laughing through this trailer. Melissa McCarthy is just one of those people who knows what she can do with comedy, and paired with her husband Ben Falcone, who's directing this one, I think that they have just kind of tapped into a great way to kind of put stories together for her, and I really enjoy watching what they end up doing on screen.
Me too. I think it looks hysterical. I think they and I didn't see Spy, but you had some good things to say about that one as well.
So good.
Yeah.
So funny.
I know I need to see it now that it's out to rent. I need to grab it. But this one, to me, it brings me that same sort of gut-wrenching laughter as when I saw. And I don't say this about the actual film. The Anchorman 2, The Legend Continues. The trailer was riotously funny, because watching they were all in the RV, and they had the bowling ball and a scorpion and some like lots of crazy knives, and it was one of the most hysterical things when he says cruise control doesn't mean that the RV is driving itself, and then it wrecks, and it does this incredibly long kind of roll and everybody gets injured, and the setup was perfect, and it was great slapstick, and it was perfect amount of injury, and I was like in spit up laughter. I had that same experience with this trailer leading up to the fight when she takes over. It's this whole idea of what's her name, who actually went to jail for insider trading, really famous blonde.
Oh, the
Empire. You know what I'm saying? She makes wreaths. Yeah, she makes wreaths and stuff.
Clearly, we're up on her
multi-godzillionaire, and the idea of seeing her in a street fight with some Girl Scouts was just too much. That there is brownie turf is just too much for me. I thought it was great. Totally disrespectful.
It was pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
What do we say when somebody does one of our cookies? Buy our cookies or I'll kill you. Oh, so good.
So
Martha Stewart is who
Martha Stewart, right.
Yes.
Martha Stewart of wreaths.
Wreaths and cooking.
And cooking.
That's what we remember of her. So anyway, this opens April, it looks like April 8th, 2016. So I'll be there to watch this one faux show.
Faux show.
Pete?
Andy?
I never want you to leave this house.
Diego Luis Contreras, thank you so much for this recommendation of Viridiana, 1961, from Luis Buñuel. You guys went through kind of a roundabout to land on this movie.
We did,
How'd you come to it?
Diego really wanted us to talk about a film from Spain, and he initially threw out a bunch of names, a bunch of titles of films that he wanted us to look at. La Torre de los Siete Torbados, The Tower of the Seven Hunchbacks, El Verdugo, El Bosque Animado, El Crack, Calle Mayor, and Viridiana. Those were all titles that he kind of threw our way. And unfortunately, just none of these, except for Viridiana, are available in the U.S. I could not find in any way any sort of an English dub that had been released over here, which is really unfortunate. It just goes to show how many films are out there in the world that are just not accessible to people worldwide, and it's kind of frustrating because some of these really sounded interesting. The Tower of the Seven Hunchbacks, he said it's a mix of suspense, terror, and Spanish folk from 1944 and kind of the post-war Spain, which sounded really interesting, and it looked, from some of the stills that he sent our way, looked pretty fascinating. They all sounded like really interesting films, and it's one of those things where I wish that there were ways for people to access more international cinema in different parts of the world. But unfortunately, we just aren't in that place right now. Viridiana is available through Criterion Collection on their DVD, and probably Hulu and iTunes,
that's how
etc.
I watched it, yeah.
Yeah, and luckily Luis Buñuel is a bit of an international name, and that is probably why he ended up, some of his films ended up getting picked up by the Criterion Collection so that they could be seen more easily. So it's kind of unfortunate that's the case, but it still is thrilling that we did get to watch this one.
It is, and it surprised me.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you at all? You had not seen this, obviously, going into it.
I had not. I had seen very few Luis Buñuel films. In fact, when he mentioned it, it was one of those. He's one of those directors where I actually felt like I had seen a lot more of his films than I had seen. I looked at his filmography and realized, gosh, I have heard so much talk of so many of his films, but I realized all I had actually seen were Un Chien Andalou, his first short film that he made, which is pretty extraordinary and definitely worth checking out if you're able to look at it. It's very surreal. He did it with the help of Salvador Dali, if that kind of gives you any sense as to what to expect. Really, really fascinating film. And Land Without Bread is the other one, which is a documentary short that he made, and also called Las Urdes, filmed in a region of Spain called Las Urdes. Very kind of funny. A mockumentary is really kind of what that is. Those were the only things I had seen. I feel like maybe in film class I had seen L'Âge d'Or, one of his, or actually his first feature, but I really can't remember at all. So this really was, as far as I think, the first feature Luis Buñuel film that I had actually seen, and I'm definitely glad that I ended up watching this one.
I was nervous going into watching this film because Un Chien Andalou was also the only Buñuel film that I had ever seen. And that was as a taste of, and I saw it very young, and so as a taste of surrealist filmmaking and the eyeball and all that more than anything else introduced me to the Pixies, which I adore. But I haven't seen anything else, and so I thought, I was worried going into this film, to Viridiana, that it was going to be an hour and a half of Un Chien Andalou, and I thought, I don't know if I can handle that. I don't know if my brain can handle that. It's going to be like it's going to be a little bit a Clockwork Orange for me, and so I have to say, incredibly relieved. As a result of sitting down to watch this movie. I really liked it. I think that it's fascinating to me just how controversial the film was at the time. The fact that it was it was mildly censored by the Spanish Film Board and had to be smuggled out to France to make sure that the Film Board would not see the final edit of the film before it could be submitted to Cannes, I find hysterical. I think it is really deliciously subversive around organized religion. And in my reading on Luis Buñuel and his history, I think it really, coming toward the end of his career, I think it is a wonderful sort of visual cinematic metaphor to his whole journey around his whole personal journey around organized religion. And I'm delighted by the performances, and I think I think the whole thing just works for me.
Yeah, it's a really interesting film. It's one of those films that I feel is like I really enjoyed the film and what they did with it. I don't know if it's a film I liked per se. It's kind of that weird balance where I felt like, wow, this was a really fascinating film. I really liked what happened in here. I liked the way he put it together. I liked the way that he kind of has this subversive look at all of this sort of stuff. It's not a film I feel like I would return to often, but I still feel like this is a filmmaker who knows how to put an interesting project together that uses a lot of really interesting montage. He uses a lot of interesting imagery throughout, and I think what I enjoyed so much about seeing this is he is a filmmaker who kind of came from the surrealist school. He in his early career, he was definitely in the surrealist circles with Dali and all of those folks. And I think what this showed me is that he was able to kind of take a lot of the elements that he learned in his dealings with surrealism and put them in a narrative project. So you still get surrealist elements going on through the film, but they end up playing as a brilliant part of the narrative and as a great way to just kind of emphasize certain things.
Talk about some of those surrealist elements. What's jumping out at you?
Well, the thing that I enjoy is that it's like he takes things that happen in the real world and kind of makes them kind of become surrealist bits, like the just a small thing is like the way that Jorge, when we see Viridiana's cousin Jorge, when he's out on the land and he sees the carriage go by and it's got the dog tied under it, this exhausted dog, and he feels so bad for this dog and he offers to buy it from the guy who owns the carriage, and so he buys the dog from it and he takes the dog, and then without noticing that as another carriage goes by, they also have a dog tied to the bottom, and he just doesn't even notice that dog. And it's just it's a nice little bit of subtext about how, just when you think you've kind of done something good, you're not going to necessarily notice, more of the same happening. And it's a great little way to kind of throw this little symbolic thing in there that just feels kind of just it's like a weird little thing to kind of add to the film. It doesn't really enhance the story in any particular way, but it's a nice way to kind of just show something that's just it's kind of a weird little quirk that he kind of uses to just give us a point about something.
How is it surreal?
It's one of those things that I felt was surreal in a way where it's like it doesn't necessarily feel like it's real in context of like the film. Like it doesn't feel like it needed to be there in any way. It feels like it's something that he added in there to just kind of emphasize a strange element of characters, and it's like he's using this as something outside of reality to tell us something about these people and about the audience and how people see things.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge. I agree with you. I think I certainly understand that, your perspective. I think what is, part of my challenge is that when I think about surrealist cinema, I generally am thinking about, this sort of use of really shocking imagery and juxtapositions of shocking imagery over the mundane, and making those connections in a much more sort of visually, I'll say, sort of blunt instrument kind of obvious way. And I think the subtlety of that dog and the message of hey, do-gooder, you are you can try your best to be good, but the world moves on around you, and you can never catch up. To me, I think it's a great metaphor for certainly what our main character Viridiana is going through, and her sort of fall from grace, and her overall narrative. I think really. It mirrors that little tiny experience of the dog. I thought that was a very sort of touching and sad parallel. I just hadn't seen it as particularly a surrealist. And
surrealist, symbolic.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of see it in the surrealist bent. I don't see it as surreal as Un Chien Andalou, slicing eyeballs and strange intercutting to kind of use montage to highlight things and make you kind of put different images together that kind of make you think things. I don't see it necessarily in that way, but it's almost more of a kind of a mental surrealism that I see. It's not it's not a melting clock or anything, but it is something that he added that element to the film that it's a symbolic element that is just strange enough that it's like it's there for only one reason. And to me, it's to kind of step outside of the reality of the story and just kind of to speak a little bit to it.
So let's speak a little bit of the reality of the story, can we? About what is going on with Viridiana, the woman, and her story in the film.
Yeah, she's an interesting character. She's a nun who's about to take her vows. So I don't know if you call her a nun yet. She's a pre-nun.
Well, no, she's a nunlet.
Nunlet?
Yeah. I think that's the ecclesiastical term, the appropriate term of art. Yeah, it's a term of art.
So she's about to take her vows, but she gets the Mother Superior gets a letter from her uncle, who has been funding all of her time at the school, and as her benefactor, and he's getting sick and would love to have her visit before she takes her vows. And she doesn't want to because she doesn't really know her uncle. She's appreciative that he's done all this for her, but at the same time, it's like, he's this mystery guy. He's never been in my life except for this element, and I just don't feel I know him. The Mother Superior kind of orders her to go, and so she goes reluctantly and ends up with an uncle that is really creepy and pathetic. This guy,
the latter.
Yeah, it's so weird. Fernando Rey plays the uncle. We've talked about him in French Connection.
Yeah.
It was great actually seeing him in something else. And it's so funny because in French Connection, I don't even know if we talked about this when we did that show. The fact that he's actually a Spanish actor. I can't remember if we brought that up. I don't think we did.
No, we didn't talk about that.
Very interesting. But yeah, he finds that Viridiana, now all grown up, looks strikingly identical to his deceased wife, who died on their deathbed. She died in bed on her wedding night, and
that's an interesting slip you just made there.
Yeah,
I don't want to call too much attention to it, but your wedding night bed you also referred to as your deathbed. Let's just make sure that that's out there.
Yeah, very kind of freaky. And why is it the deathbed on the wedding night? Very strange little element that he never really goes into, but it is interesting. She looks so much like his deceased wife that he pretty much falls in love with Viridiana and doesn't want her to leave. And he actually asks her to model his deceased wife's wedding gown, and then he drugs her and plans to rape her so that she won't be able to return to the life with the nuns. And then he kind of, his better judgment gets the best of him. He doesn't end up raping her. He just kind of touches her and kisses her in a few awkward ways. And then he lets her go, only to hang himself and leave a note giving her and his illegitimate son to another woman basically the run of the house. And so then the latter half of the film is her, Viridiana, as she decides she doesn't want to be a nun after all, but she still wants to do good. So she takes in all of these paupers And it's quite a group of characters. She takes them in to kind of help them and give them a better life and have them help at the house and all that. And her cousin Jorge, who he's trying to figure out what she's doing, but doesn't seem to have too much of a problem with it. Instead, he wants to kind of take care of the land and everything. Meantime, he kind of falls for Viridiana. And then there's this, they leave one night, there's this massive, debauchery, dinner of debauchery held by these paupers in the house, which is definitely something we're going to have to talk about. Mm-hmm. And then Viridiana is distraught by the fact that these poor people that she's been trying to help really just reveal the fact that they are what they are. And she, lost and broken, ends up kind of succumbing to her cousin and giving herself in to the realities of the world. It's a very interesting film. It
is a story of a fall from grace. We got to go back, rewind a little bit to talk about the uncle. It's interesting that I think that you characterize his shift as an introduction of better judgment. That is not how I saw it at all. To me, the way he portrayed it, I think Ray's performance was actually quite good and demonstrating for me what was ultimately a guy whose deepest intention was to do something horrible, right? His intention was to rape her so that she would have to fall from grace. She would not be able to go back to the nunnery, and she would have to stay with him and be her and be his wife, because she would be sullied. But when he drugs her with his complicit servant, he drugs her and then attempts to follow through on his dark desires. He shows up as sort of impotent, right? He is emotionally impotent. He can't actually follow through with what he was going to do, and so he carries it on as a lie. But I think that impotence, that sort of character impotence, is what drives him to kill himself, right? And I think that's the interesting thing to me about that character. It's that, he attempted to do something to follow through on himself, but he was too weak to do it. And couldn't live with himself and couldn't live with his own sort of inner demons. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think he portrayed it just right for me in that context.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a thing where he's kind of holding out against his better judgment, like I said. I mean, I think there's a little bit of that in there. But even when he's writing his suicide note, he has that glint of a smile as he's doing it, as if there's something malicious that he's planning, like kind of this wicked plan that he's putting together of somehow I'm going to get her back through my son. And I obviously he couldn't have foreseen what was going to happen, but it does feel like there's some sort of strange plan that he is hoping will fall into place by writing this note and then killing himself.
And that's so interesting too, right? Here's this guy who is, he's a recluse now. He talks about his house. He says the house is, the house is pretty much a wreck. Everything with the exception of the first floor is overrun with spiders, which is really awful. I've been thinking a lot about just that a little bit. And so he is alone. He's a lone, lonely man, and to me, he's a guy who demonstrates that this is why we can't have good things, because what he sees in Viridiana is this image of perfection, and perfection comes in sort of beauty. It comes in just sort of the package of what he sees. It comes in her personality, and it comes in her chosen field of study. And he, having been somebody who I think has already fallen from his own grace at the death of his wife, he is now to the point where he can't see anyone else be that good, and this is his effort to destroy what is good. And the contrast, or I think the conflict of presenting this character as the noble patron initially, but balanced against how he behaves, makes him a really interesting character to me. And I was a little bit disappointed that we lose him so early in the film.
Yeah, definitely so. And it is interesting how through his death, he does end up creating this guilt in her which drives her to leave the nunnery. It's this guilt created by his suicide, as if she feels guilty that he killed himself, even though she's not complicit in this rape that he initially said that he did, and then he admitted the truth. I didn't really rape you. I was going to, but I didn't. But it's like, even though she's like, Viridiana feels guilty about this, the fact that he killed himself for her,
right,
even though she also says, I don't feel guilty at all. It's this strange juxtaposition of emotions that she ends up finding from this whole thing that I think begins her battle of trying to figure out how to do good. But I think that she's so naive that I don't think that she fully understands it,
Yeah, and that exact point, as the authorities come to the bus stop and prevent her from leaving. And if you think about that, like, had he not hung himself, she would be gone. She would be back to the nunnery, and that shame likely would not have kicked in, right? You sort of think out into this other narrative future. Things would have gone back to normal. She would have sort of prayed her way out of it. And here, just having her stay in that context, the sort of physical context of the compound, and the emotional context of the sort of recoiling from the fact that he had hung himself and gifted everything that he had to her and this illegitimate son of his. I think you're right. It cements her to a path that she cannot get off of, and she tries to create her own sort of vision of service, and that's what she I think wants to do with this compound, is create a home for those who are in need.
Yeah,
right. She's turning it into her own shelter, to try to make good on the fact that she's feeling that shame. She's living in that shame, and I think it becomes her method of penance. And the symbols of penance are plenty in this film, from the thorny crown that she carries in her suitcase. Even ironically, to the switchblade hidden in the crucifix. Right. The sort of images of religious symbols associated with things that give pain, I think, are aplenty. And so, yeah, like the dog, she brings in all of these. She goes and she finds the paupers, and they're paupers of many different ilk. Some are blind, some are handicapped in other ways, some are diseased. There's this controversy around one of them, whether or not they're lepers, or he's a leper, brought into the compound, and she is trying on what it feels like to wear sort of the cloth of the Savior.
And it's interesting how she is really only looking at the good that she can, I guess you could say she wants to see in these people, even though time and time again, they really just prove themselves as, they are who they are. And perhaps they're just playing along with her so that they can kind of get the benefit of a benefactress who's going to just kind of feed them and take care of them. Even if, she does kind of say, well, we're all going to work. And, one of them is, we see painting, we see some people gardening and cooking. And so they kind of take some things on. But in reality, they are who they are. They all still constantly are forcing the guy who's potentially leprous, forcing him out, and, tying a can around his leg so they know when he's coming, and just always being mean to him. I love the relationship between the woman who has 2 children and the pregnant woman, and how much seeming just disgust and annoyance the pregnant woman finds in the children. It's just like, it's very telling, that particular relationship. And the blind guy has the relationship with the woman who has the 2 kids, but then that other guy ends up kind of raping her, which sets a whole thing off. It is this group of people who, they are just kind of down and dirty, rough paupers, and this is who they are, and they don't change, even though she really is trying to find the good in them and working to make them change. It clearly doesn't work, even though it does when she's around. That's
right.
it's this facade that they kind of put on for her, which I think is really interesting.
I think the unraveling of that facade is paced really well in the film too, right? Because it starts with the first dinner when they're all together and eating, and she brings them all back. She's introducing some new people to the group, and they're all great. She says there's going to be work tomorrow. I can't wait. Each according to his ability, and everybody is very positive and enthusiastic and excited. And then she goes to bed, and they kick the leper out. Right? They rally against him, and it turns out the superficiality of their sort of desire to take on her charity is unveiled to us, and I think it's done in a really sort of fascinating and kind of well-paced way. So we already see that these guys, they're just wolves, they're just, they're dingoes. And they protect their own. They don't like newcomers, and they're in it for whatever it is that is going to make their lives better. And when you compare the message we get from the paupers that you can't change who they are at their core, and you apply that to Viridiana, that maybe her journey to the church was the facade all along, I think makes for one of the more interesting kind of puzzles in the film.
Well, and it is a very interesting way to end the film, and it certainly does speak to kind of the the dark journey that Viridiana ends up taking, where she basically, Jorge, who kind of did admit his mistress left, and he's kind of fallen for Viridiana, and Viridiana at the end. Oh, while we also see that Jorge also has a thing for Ramona, the servant.
He seems to have a thing for everybody, really.
Yeah, pretty much any woman that kind of comes into his circle, he's kind of got something for.
And as such, he's really the only character that exists in his own sort of integrity throughout the entire film.
Well, and all the paupers, I would say.
Well, yeah, no, they don't, because they have a facade whenever they're around her. Jorge never really puts on a facade. He is who he is all the way through the film.
You're right. He, so we've got this fascinating ending where Jorge and Ramona seems like they're going to have something starting in the bedroom when Viridiana knocks and comes in, and this is after she's been essentially has had her world destroyed by the realities of what the paupers tried to do. Not just destroying the house, as they had this bacchanalish, I don't know if I can say that, feast. The Last Supper,
which was awesome. The freeze frame of all of them on doing the sort of the montage or the
Da Vinci's Last Supper.
Da Vinci's Last Supper was really cool and really funny. Although I would add, and then I'll let you get back to it. This was the only part of the film. The Bacchan feast was the only part of the film that I think didn't hold up. It was pretty dated.
Interesting.
Now you.
Interesting. But then it devolves as they come home, and as two of these guys, rabble-rousers, try to, first they knock out Jorge and tie him up, and then they grab Viridiana and try to rape her. They're only stopped because Jorge comes out of wakes up after having been knocked out and convinces one of them, I guess he's kind of the leper, El Leproso. He convinces him to kill the other guy as he's trying to rape Viridiana in exchange for money. And because of the money, this guy is willing to do that, and he takes the little shovel. What do you call those shovels for your
Isn't
fireplace?
It like an andiron?
That's the metal. That's the poker thing, right?
That's the poker. I don't know what the shovel. I guess I always called it a wee shovel.
It's the wee shovel. You take the wee shovel and hit the other guy over the head repeatedly until he's dead. But through all that, I guess my point is Viridiana has been changed and scarred and has seen this perfect world that she's been trying to set up destroyed. She has seen the other dog that she's not able to save, essentially, and gives herself in to her cousin's desires, and with a very interesting change in the script that Buñuel had to make due to the Spanish censors. Initially, it was going to be her coming into Jorge's room and closing the door and basically saying, she succumbs to his desires and he takes her. Instead, he has her come into the room where Ramona is already there and says, "Oh, we're just playing some cards." And then you've got that just crazy last line. I always knew, I can't remember exactly what it is, but
I always knew we would shuffle the deck together or shuffle cards together. I don't know how it translates.
Right, exactly. Which is my cousin and I will end up shuffling the deck together.
Yeah.
It's a great little way to say, I knew that we would end up sleeping together, and not only that, but saying it with another woman there, implying a kind of a menage a trois. As
the camera beautifully pulls out so slowly from the table down the hallway, into the room, it's really suggestive.
While we listen to Shimmy Doll,
yes,
like an old pop song, it was such a strange, funny way to end the film that said so much. And
what was the original? Because that was the suggested ending. What was the original ending of the film?
Well, it was her going into the room, and he's by himself, and we see her slowly close the door on us, implying that she's going to him, and they're going to basically have sex, and she's kind of hit that point of corruption. So instead, he made it a card game, but through the implications of the dialogue, basically created a much more lascivious ending. I think
that's right. It was suggestive. So the Spanish Film Board said, "No, that's suggestive. We need you to make it more suggestive." This is a banner event in the development of Spanish film history.
It's pretty comical the way that he kind of ended up going about this, but it says so much about this downfall of her, and it says so much of this step that she's taking, like you were saying, of her going to kind of where she was going to be all along, which was basically just being kind of another woman in the lives of men, and whether she ends up somebody who's going to have babies or what, it's like she becomes kind of the just another woman, and it's a very interesting kind of painful portrayal, but coming through Buñuel, it does have a very biting way about it.
Does it end? It sounds like, for the way you're talking about it, doesn't end optimistically to you.
I don't think so. I don't think it ends. Well, it's tricky. I mean, is it optimistic? If she's ending up in a place that she may have been heading all along, is that optimism, or is that does it end up being pessimistic because she had higher ambitions? It's just those were destroyed. Yet she does end where she probably was going to be all along. So I don't know if that's optimism or pessimism or just realism.
Well, and that may be it. I to me, as the film ended, the thing that I found myself sort of gratified about is that, and I think I'm watching, again, paralleling Buñuel's journey, which is this, that there is, that in his view, organized religion is very destructive, and it is, he's not a fan. He was raised in strict organized religion, and he fell from it. And for him, as I'm sort of looking at this through his eyes, that message is, that sort of film to his world connection is, she through all of these sort of darker things, she has been in some way rescued. Right?
Yeah.
So the fact that she goes in and there's a strongly suggested sexual event about to occur is maybe just another kind of piece of her physical awakening. But the fact is, she is on a path now that is authentic to her, where she was not before. And to me, that came off as strangely optimistic. When I look at it in that context, I think it's really ends up being kind of a powerful statement. But I can totally see how, if you look at this from a fall from grace, that where she was doing the higher good, and now she is not able to do that. I had never looked at it, your words, that she is another woman in the lives of men. I think that's a really strong way to put it from that perspective, and it's much more painful when I look at it that way.
Well, it is, and it's tricky. And the thing I like about it is that it's not he's not just feeding us the answer as to kind of what really is happening here. I think what he does so well is basically say, look, there is no real good or real evil. It's really what everybody is different shades of gray, and the world is just shades of gray. And people who deliberately try to be so good that they are dismissing everything else are creating their own facade because they're not admitting that there are these evils out there. I mean, geez, we just talked about the trailer Spotlight earlier. Mm-hmm. That clearly talks about the world of religion here. And I think that Buñuel really tapped into that here and showed, Viridiana was on this path of incredible good, but she doesn't end up there. It's, people aren't that easy. It's not that simple. And the uncle, I mean, he has these terrible notions about what he wants to do with her and drugs her, but he does have this really oddly empathetic, pathetic side about him that is a very interesting way to look at. All of the characters really show that, and I find it really fascinating that he takes that angle as he's kind of looking at all of this.
Fascinating. It is a fascinating film. Do you want to talk about any of the people beyond Fernando Rey? Silvia Pinal?
Yeah, Silvia Pinal
Viridiana?
Yeah, she's quite the person, and I hadn't realized it. I just hadn't explored her career at all. But she is quite a leading lady of Mexico. She was really kind of became huge in the 40s. And she was one of the Mexican movie stars of the golden era, and in lots of great films. She did, I think, 3 films with Buñuel. She did this, The Exterminating Angel, and Simone of the Desert. And interestingly, through her different husbands, ended up kind of taking different directions in her career. Her second husband, Gustavo Alatriste, she was married to him at the time she started working for Buñuel. Her husband actually ended up producing some of these films and helping kind of get the financing for them. She did TV. She was in politics for a while, and she was a producer. She is a theater owner. Her daughters are kind of in the business. She's really kind of a force in Mexican cinema, which I find really, really interesting. And if you look at her now in today's age, she clearly just looks like kind of one of those older, just wild and crazy kind of characters, and very fun to kind of see this woman and somebody who's just, I think she's really a great performer. I mean, she was really solid in this film. I really liked what she brought to the screen.
I agree. I thought she was really terrific. It's fascinating to see just how active she still is today.
Yeah, right.
On not just film but television and stage. She's done a number of big performances in stage and as a stage producer. So
right,
very active. She was great.
Yeah, we already talked about Fernando Rey. Francisco Rabal played her cousin Jorge. He's quite the actor too. I mean, he had quite a career. It seems like meeting Buñuel and working with him is kind of a great start to his career, and that's really where he started getting out into the world as far as a little more popularity and everything. He was in, I mean, geez, his credits, he's got 216 credits to his name, so he's definitely been a very, very busy boy. He did pass away in 2001 on a plane. It sounds like he was traveling on a plane, and it aggravated some bronchitis he had, and it ended up, they couldn't help him after he got off the plane. It ended up killing him. Very tragic, but he was in a lot of interesting films. I had actually seen him in a few of his films. One of them, the most recent that I had seen, was Goya in Bordeaux, which he had done in '99, playing Goya, who he actually played 3 times over the course of his career. So kind of interesting. But he was another guy. I just really liked his presence on the screen. I felt, I guess, much like what you were saying about his character, how he's really always who he says he is. He never puts up any facades. I really just felt that about him. He just was a solid character and really just kind of very straightforward. I liked him quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree with you, and he's incredibly charismatic, and part of that is the character he played in a film that is all about facade. To have this one character who is not about facade, but you're set up to think it's about facade, and it turns out he's the one who is just rock solid all the way through, in spite of his flaws. I think he is. I think the character allowed him to really shine as a charismatic sort of leading man type. I thought he was great. He was wonderful to watch.
Margarita Lozano played Ramona, the servant. I don't have a whole lot to say about her, although I did like her in this quite a bit. I liked kind of the way that she played it. But she was in A Fistful of Dollars. We had seen her before.
What was she in Fistful of Dollars? Did we not talk about her?
I don't know. She was Consuelo Baxter, and honestly, I just can't remember.
Me neither.
How big of a part that was. I think Consuelo Baxter was the wife of one of the factions, the faction who lived on the, I want to say the north end of the town, although I have no reason to call it the north end. I don't know why I'm calling it the north end. I don't think they ever say, but I think she's the wife of the guy at the like the rich guy at the end of the town, not the kind of more raucous troublemaker guys at the other end of town. I think so. That was her. Julio Alejandro co-wrote this with Luis Buñuel, and they had worked together a number of times. Mexican writer who has a pretty solid writing career, 85 credits to his name. And I believe that they worked together a couple other times. So I think that the two of them worked well on creating this script and coming up with a solid story.
I think it works really well. I'm surprised you don't like it as much as I do.
I like it.
You said
I
it.
did. I did. I like it. It's not something that I feel like I would return to, is really kind of what I was implying. Yeah.
All right.
And I think Jose Aguayo, the cinematographer who shot this, I was just going to say he is quite a prolific Spanish cinematographer who came on this with Buñuel, and I liked the cinematography, but there's a lot of sloppiness to it. Yes. Is that your comment?
That was my comment, and I think that the innocence has spoiled me to intrigue in black and white.
Interesting.
This I kept wanting, like, this was there are so many elements of this film that felt like they should be darker, higher contrast, more, just more engaging placement of the camera, and I kept coming back to the innocence and just how well that film works visually, and I found myself disappointed.
Well, I think a lot of that goes to Buñuel, and what I read about Buñuel is I couldn't find anything budget related for this film. Nothing, not a sausage. But I did find that Buñuel, early in his life, he was so conscious of, or he had to be so conscious of money, whether it was just his life or his films or whatever. He was so conscious about money that he really, really did everything he could in all of his films to finish ahead of schedule for less money than they had given him, because he was so careful about that sort of thing in his life. And what I read was that became his focus more so than making sure he got the shots perfectly, making sure things were as planned. In fact, he would often be more inclined to come in under schedule and under budget than to make sure he got all the coverage that he needed, as long as he got something. That was kind of his filmmaking style, and he became kind of known for that. So I think that ends up reflecting in the way that it ended up looking. I think that Aguayo ended up capturing the story that Buñuel wanted to tell, but I think, and I don't know Aguayo's work, I don't know if he could have done better if it hadn't been for Buñuel, but I think what ended up happening is Buñuel didn't have a problem with sloppiness as long as the story got told via cinematic image.
Yeah, I think that's true. The other bit that I read, this goes back to L'Âge d'Or, that his first feature, that he built so much of that reputation on, shooting that film in order, every sequence in order, and using nearly every foot of film that he shot. Because he wanted to make sure that, he, as you say, that he came in on budget ahead of time and had no practical sort of training in filmmaking. It was he was stumbling very much, kind of self-taught and relying on others to kind of get him through this. And when he lost support of some of his key supporters in the filmmaking, the artistry of it, that it came back to him just sort of trying to figure it out on his own. And so I think I think you're right, and it ends up it's disappointing that he never sort of shook that, because I think it could have been a better film.
It's interesting that when this film was released, it's hard to say it even really had what you would call a release. This film, when they finished it, they brought it over to Cannes to play there, like you had mentioned, and it wasn't even in the official lineup at Cannes. It wasn't in the competition, and it played in the very last day. But because it sent kind of, I guess you could say, such a shockwave through its audience, it ended up tying for best film at the 1961 Cannes Film Festival, which said a lot. And they said, "Oh, it's one of the best Spanish films," and all this. And then Franco and all of the people involved in the Franco government in Spain at the time got wind of the film, and Franco tried to have it withdrawn. He ordered that all of the elements and everything related to this film were destroyed. I guess that Silvia actually took she went to France, grabbed the copy, she took it out of the spools or something, and she basically she snuck it back to Mexico so that they had a copy of it. And other people had been like burying copies of the film and stuff and all of its elements on farms and whatever they could to kind of preserve it. And meanwhile, all the rest of it ended up getting destroyed under the Franco regime. And this film ended up, I mean, the official newspaper of the Vatican said it was blasphemous, and all sorts of places were basically shutting this film down. They would not show it. They banned it. Spain, it was banned through the entire Franco regime until 1977. This film ended up kind of getting shown in back rooms and on walls, and it had that sort of underground life. So that's why I think that there really are no numbers for this, because I don't know if this is a film that actually profited. I don't know if this is a film that became famous because of what he was saying, and it's not necessarily something that ever was even meant to be a blockbuster. It was just it's a Buñuel film. It's something where he's trying to say something, putting some art out there, and letting people kind of take what they get from it without worrying about it being, the next big blockbuster or something.
Mm. Well, I came away with it thinking just that it is I thought it was a fantastic statement of a bold and a filmmaker, an opinionated filmmaker, and I am deeply gratified that this was the recommendation. I'm really glad to be introduced to Buñuel with this film in particular, and it makes me want to go back and watch some more.
Yeah, Diego had said that, he kind of recommended, before we do this, we should watch, I think he gave us like another 5 or 6 films from Buñuel to watch. It's like, gosh, I hope I have time to watch any of them. I didn't have time to watch any of the others, but it does make me curious to see more of his films now, a lot more than I had been, so I'm definitely glad. I think Ebert said something about, anyone who's serious about cinema ends up getting to Buñuel at some point, because he's just one of those filmmakers that is a serious filmmaker that people who want to know more about the world of cinema and really study film, they do end up kind of talking about at some point, because he is an important filmmaker. And I think it's interesting that Buñuel, in his autobiography at the end of his life, he actually said, which I think says a lot about him and the way that he sees the world. He said he'd be happy to burn all of the prints of all of his films.
That's really interesting. You know, that actually makes me think, not to dive too much back into the discussion of the film, but it makes me reflect on the montage, too. There's a great montage where it's the work montage, right? Where we have the sequence of her working so hard to build up these paupers and to have them working and contributing and teaching and praying, and it's mostly praying at this point. And it's intercut with Jorge's workers who are destroying parts of the house, right? And they're destroying parts of the house with the intention to renovate it, right? To clean it up, to build new pieces of it. And it's a fascinating thing because when you watch it the first time, if you know, at least my experience of it, as I watch it the first time, it looks so much like, you know, we have this one piece that is creation and one piece that is destruction, and that in itself is a bold sort of visual statement. But once you get to the end of the movie and reflect on what that montage is really saying, it turns out it's the opposite. That everything she was doing was working toward destruction, and everything he was doing was working toward creation. And I thought that was just a fantastic sort of visual twist, a structural cinematic twist that highlights for me the real kind of power of Buñuel's filmmaking. As sort of clumsy and sloppy as it may be, that ends up being a powerful demonstration of message.
I agree.
All right.
And, you know, we didn't even mention, just a last little bit, Buñuel's apparent foot fetish. Which we definitely see brought to light here in this film a number of times. It may be jumping rope feet.
Yes, it may be.
It may be Fernando Rey trying on his deceased wife's shoes.
Yes,
and it may be him looking at Viridiana's ankles.
He does. He did love his feet. He rubbed his feet something good. He cleaned his feet. Lots of foot stuff.
Yes,
so glad you brought that up.
That's a good way to end.
We should probably rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel and do a little search for Viridiana and add it to your list, and then rank it along with us, and let's just see where we end up.
This will be an interesting one because it's going to be the balance of the quality of film with the likelihood of rewatching.
I absolutely agree. I think we're going to come down to agreeing more than disagreeing on this one.
Yes, we shall see. First up, Viridiana or The Bad Seed. Here I will say
Viridiana.
Yeah. Viridiana or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Eternal Sunshine.
Eternal Sunshine, indeed. Viridiana or Stanley Kubrick's The Killing. I'm with The Killing here.
Yeah, me too.
Viridiana or Sweeney Todd, The Demon Barber of Fleet Street. Haven't seen that one pop up in a while.
Sweeney Todd.
Yeah, Sweeney Todd it is. Viridiana or Chronicle?
I think Viridiana for me here.
Chronicle I would definitely watch first.
Yeah.
I would definitely watch that first. But I do think there's a lot more interesting stuff going on in Viridiana. So I agree with you. Viridiana here. Viridiana or Adaptation? Adaptation. Yep. Viridiana or The Lavender Hill Mob? I would do The Lavender Hill Mob, actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Viridiana or Creepshow? I am totally Creepshow on this one.
Really?
It is. If it was a bad movie, this would be a guilty pleasure. I just love that movie so much.
I'm feeling generous. I will give it to you, but I think I think Better Angels would step in if I'm ranking this alone, and it would be Viridiana for me.
I think you may be right, but yeah, this is what can I say? Well, Viridiana did crack our top 100. It is number 99 out of 212.
That's a good place for it. I think it's I think that we will see Buñuel again in our upcoming films. Maybe not upcoming too soon, but we're going to see them again because this has inspired me to want to talk about more of his work.
Definitely. Yeah. If anything, I got out of this a real fascination in what he is doing in film and in cinema, and it's definitely something that I do want to visit more of. So I think you're right. Let's figure that out on our schedule one of these days.
Isn't it fascinating that as both of us, as both of us were educated in college in film,
right,
in the study of film or the creation of film, and we haven't done more, where I feel like we're coming to Buñuel late in our cinematic career. Don't you a little bit?
I do. Although, I will say when we were in college, I feel like, Criterion and, I don't want to give too much credence to Criterion's role in kind of expanding people's minds on Luis Buñuel, but I will say they have helped kind of make some more of his films accessible.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if some of his other features were as accessible when we were in college. I mean, that being said, most of the stuff that we were watching in college were still film prints, so it's likely that my film professors could have found film prints of his films to actually bring into class.
Yeah, that's the piece that is a little bit frustrating to me, that I feel like, gosh, I would love to have been talking about Buñuel, and I feel like now that we have, it adds a new dimension to sort of the vernacular that we can use to talk about film. So I love it. Where do we go from here? This was our listener's choice, and I should say again, thank you so much, Diego. As much as we enjoy in doing this show, because we love introducing films to people who have not seen them, it's kind of one of the core tenets of this show. It is equally gratifying when we do films that neither of us have seen and get to have new films introduced to us. So thank you so much for doing this, and it's why we do this great listener's choice thing. So this was a real win.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely big thanks for coming up with this one. And, like I said in the beginning, it would be great if there were ways for us to get access to more of those other sorts of films out there. But it is what it is. We got to take what we can get. So, I'm just appreciative that we were able to see these ones.
We're doing something that is, what would you'd call it, a tonal shift?
This is a definite tonal shift. Yes, completely in the different direction. We are actually going to be stepping into the world of Harold Ramis, who we lost. Was it last year that Harold Ramis passed away?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it was. Tragically, yes, he did pass away, and I don't know if that's particularly why we wanted to talk about Harold Ramis, or we just wanted to kind of jump in on some of his films. We're kind of looking at him as the writer and director side of him. We're going to be talking about Ivan Reitman's film Stripes, and we're going to be talking about that's one that Harold Ramis wrote, and then Caddyshack and National Lampoon's Vacation, two films that he did direct. So it's going to be a fun series. We're actually starting with Caddyshack, then we'll do Stripes and end on Vacation. And, I've never fully seen Stripes, so I'm looking forward to seeing that.
I can't believe that.
I know. It's just crazy. I don't know. But Caddyshack and Vacation are films that I certainly have enjoyed. And I think we were talking about Harold Ramis and these three particular films, and we're curious to see how they end up holding up now that it's been a while since we've kind of hit them.
The problem with talking about those films is that they are so dependent on context. And we're going to talk a lot about this, I think, in the coming weeks. But, I have never watched any of these movies that I have enjoyed. I've never watched any of them with the intent to be critical of them.
Right.
And that makes me super nervous.
Well, yeah, that can be something that we'll have to address as we start looking at them and see how they hold up, whether it's something he wrote or wrote and directed or just directed.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're off.
Yes, indeed.
Until then, Andy, I gotta go to bed.
All right. I gotta go stare at some feet for a little while. All right, well, I've got a 2-star by Thomas Aquinas. Did Buñuel know any poor people? This movie draws you in, there's no doubt about it, but you soon sense that something is wrong. And what that is both a sense of impending and overwhelming evil and a gross caricature of the poor. Apparently, Buñuel imagined himself as a realist in assessing human nature as essentially corrupt and irreformable, but this is simply not true, as anyone who has worked with the poor and suffering can tell you. Yes, the lives of the suffering can be turned around with charity, especially charity informed by faith in Christ. I've seen it myself many times. So one has to ask, did Buñuel ever try helping others, or is this movie just one long excuse for his own failure to love his neighbor as himself. The deconstructor should not be above deconstruction, and his psychological motivation for producing this film should be subject to scrutiny by his own method for analyzing human behavior. Regardless of his clumsy attempt to deride religion and virtue, the main character Viridiana comes across as a heroic woman, and the anti-hero comes across as an amoral lout, so much so that most people will sympathize with Viridiana and religion. For this reason, the movie merits a couple of stars. The movie also has value for its place in the history of cinema and modernist thought, and as a warning against the latter. It's an interesting review. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but I do think that at least this person is kind of at least thinking about it, and they're kind of, you know, coming up with some interesting thoughts. But that being said, you know, I don't think that Viridiana ends up coming across as a heroic woman. I think this is a person who ends up kind of painting a little bit of their own religious perspective on the film.
Yeah, and I think that's where my reviewer comes in too. This is a 1-star, and you know, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's lengthy. But here, this sort of sums it up. Bad movies are made with the intent to defile. Viridiana is the story of the defilement of a nun. With Viridiana, one has the distinct impression that Buñuel looks with favor upon the idea that the nun, Miss Viridiana, is defiled. Further, that other nuns ought to be defiled, and probably that the whole process should be applied to the audience as well. So his intent, as it seems to me, is to defile the audience. This is a bad movie, the holotype of a bad movie. And then the reviewer goes on to talk about how we need a second star rating for just bad and ugly movies, and there's something of a diatribe there. But what's more interesting is the litany of commentary on that particular review, which sometimes we dig into and sometimes we don't. Things like, reviewers like Irish Eyes should have the wit to stay away from films like this. People with axes to grind, especially those afflicted with religious hysteria, never make trustworthy reviewers. Or, your vague ideas about a film critique are littered with the obvious disdain for Buñuel's film. The referencing sources you quote are disjointed, with the exception of 2 or 3 half-hearted sentences about the film. Your entire review is nothing but filler for a sad venting about how you see society, and that a film like this would never be a part of the perfection you would want to create. Should we hang the Pilgrims for coming to this country over 400 years ago and starting the genocide of the American Indian just because in your word, it would be bad? Your review, and you, sir, are bad. Bad for Amazon, bad for critics, and bad for anyone who tries to decipher whatever it is you were trying to say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
quite the review of the review there.
It was a review of the review, but I think it's fascinating that this film, you know, as we talked about, was banned for as long as it was. That it inspired such, you know, acrimony in those who watch it, and you know, that it says that much more, I think, for the strong statement that Buñuel was trying to make, and apparently succeeded in making.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Amazon.
It is hard to believe we have been having in-depth conversations about movies since 2011.
You are telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
Season 5 had some great adaptations, like our Meryl Streep Oscar-nominated performances series. We covered adaptations like Kramer vs. Kramer, Sophie's Choice, and The French Lieutenant's Woman.
It's a real Sophie's Choice between those books. You see what I did there?
Yeah. And I don't think it's quite at the level of a real Sophie's Choice.
We also did Snowpiercer for our Bong Joon-ho series, adapted from the French graphic novel Le Transpersonnage. Man, I love that movie.
We had our 2-part 1939 series that included adaptations like Gone with the Wind, Ninotchka, The Women, and The Hound of the Baskervilles.
A number of those 1939 movies, like Goodbye, Mr. Chips, also tied into our recent 1940 Academy Award Best Picture nominee series.
Our Naughty Children horror series had creepy adaptations like The Bad Seed, Village of the Damned, The Innocents, and Children of the Corn.
For our Hayao Miyazaki series, we talked about his take on Lupin III with The Castle of Cagliostro, plus his own The Wind Rises.
Some great listener choice picks too, Viridiana and The Great Escape.
And for our David Mamet Wright series, The Verdict, The Untouchables, and Glengarry Glen Ross.
Plus, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang from our Shane Black series adapted from Brett Halliday's novel, Bodies Are Where You Find Them.
Dive into the sources for all of these at thenextreel.com/originals.
Every book you buy helps support the show. Check out thenextreel.com/originals today and find your next read.